So y'all can't see or hear it?
No,
Negative.
we stopped when it was just getting started on the rules, Robert's Rules of Order.
Oh my goodness. The whole thing?
Yeah, that's why we were asking.
Oh my goodness. Okay. All right. I'll put it, I'm so sorry about that. I'll put it in Slack and y'all can watch it later. I don't want it is a little bit long and I don't want to get the speaker. Whoop. So our next speaker is going to be logging on in just a minute. So we'll I'll put it in Slack and y'all can watch it there. Okay.
Thank you.
So Amelia should be logging on in just a few minutes.
Hey, I'm on now.
Oh, there she is. Good
Hello.
deal. So we can go ahead and get started if you'd like.
Okay, great. I will share my screen.
So I'll go ahead and introduce her. So this is Amelia O'Hare. She's an inclusion specialist with the NCPAD, which is the National Center on Health, Physical Activity, and Disability at the Lakeshore Foundation. Her background is in urban planning and community development, and she is a passionate advocate for disability rights, universally designed communities, active transportation, and environmental justice. In her work, Ms. O'Hare advocates for accessible trails and outdoor spaces that are movable and welcoming. Ms. O'Hare is currently working on active transportation and other issues around the built environment for inclusively designed communities. She is currently also working on her master's degree at the University of Washington, where she studies landscape architecture and urban design. She is from Birmingham, Alabama, and is now just way on the West Coast, enjoying life.
Thank you. Yes, the Pacific Northwest is quite the place to be. It's beautiful, but it's also a bit rainy and cloudy, so it's very different than Birmingham, Alabama. So can everyone see my screen?
Yes, I can see her.
Fantastic.
Yeah.
You can? Okay. Cool.
Yeah,
Yes.
we're good.
Sorry. I'm just going to. I'm going to pause for a short minute. Sorry. Okay. Alrighty. So I am so excited to be here speaking to all of you on universal design and disability justice. So let's get started. I'm going to turn my camera off while I read over my notes to make sure I don't miss anything, but I'll turn my camera back on when we're done.
Amelia, you can put it in the presentation mode.
Oh, can you not see it?
Yeah, it's just not the whole like presentation mode. It's just the like you still got the taskbar at the top.
Oh yeah. Okay, hold on.
Bottom right, there's a little camera thing right near the slider for the.
Yeah. Okay, got it. There we go. Oh, I'm sorry, it stopped doing that. I promise I'm better at
There you go.
technology
There you
than I
go.
appear.
Perfect.
Okay, cool. So I would like to start with just a brief overview of disability rights and history. So there are approximately 64 million people with disabilities living in the US that lead independent lives and who define themselves on their personal personhood, their ideas, beliefs, hopes, and dreams. above and beyond their disability. Since the mid 1900s, people with disabilities have pushed for recognition of disability as an aspect of identity that influences the experiences of individuals and not just as a sole defining feature of a person. People with disabilities have battled for centuries of biases and harmful stereotypes and fear. The stigmatization of disability resulted in the social and economic marginalization of Americans with disabilities. And like many other oppressed minorities have been left out of society and just advancing in day-to-day life. Okay. In the 1940s and 50s, after World War II, veterans who came back and were injured and had disabilities were able to start the rehabilitation movement. And this opened the doors for a lot of access, pushing in universities and public spaces. They demanded equal access in public space, at universities and jobs and so on. And this really speared or started the movement, the disability rights movement in the US. By the 60s, the civil rights movement began to take shape, and disability advocates also saw the opportunity to join in other minority groups fight for equal rights. So, and then I'm sorry, I'm just skipping ahead to my other parts. And then jumping ahead to the 1990s when the ADA was passed, many of you probably have heard of the Americans with Disability Act. And this is just the law that protects people with disabilities' rights to access public space, housing, and so on. So now I'm going to go to the next slide. So disability rights versus justice, disability justice. So disability rights are human rights. So as I have mentioned, treatment of people with disabilities and the idea of disabilities has definitely transformed since the 1900s. This is largely because people with disabilities have demanded and created changes. Like the civil rights movement, the disability rights movement has a long history. We have included, I'm sorry, I have not included a lot of resources on this. However, there is a ton to read on this topic. So disability justice, what does that mean? It means all bodies are unique and essential. All bodies have strengths and needs that must be met. And it's a more empowering idea of disability justice. It means that we have every right to be in the room and in space, public space. So here are the top 10 principles of disability justice: intersectionality, leadership, anti-capitalist politics. I'm not going to go into every single one of these, but I will address just a few. I'm sorry, I skipped. So intersectionality, I think a lot of us hear this term a lot, but to put it simply, it means that a disability is a diverse group of people. Anyone and everyone can experience it. And in the world, it is the largest minority group. Okay. And recognizing wholeness. So knowing that each person is full of history and life experiences. Each person has an internal experience, their own thoughts, emotions, etc. So disability and people as a whole, we're not just our disability, we are artists, musicians, educators, friends, etc. Okay, So what is universal design? So there are 7 principles: equitable use, flexibility in use, simple and intuitive, information, tolerance for error, low physical effort, and size and space for approach and use. So as mentioned earlier, my background is in urban planning, and I'm currently studying landscape architecture. And in this, I am studying the way spaces are used and how we can create more equitable use of these spaces. So I'm just going to go into a few of them. Let's start with equitable use. What does that mean? I think these are just some questions we can think about when we talk about equitable use. So what is an design of equitable design space? And what are some ways spaces can be more equitable and welcoming? And what are some barriers that make spaces exclusive? So when I think of this, I think of spaces where maybe the design itself is hostile. For example, a space that has more stairs than access ramps, or a space where the sidewalk cuts off. This can also go beyond that. It can go into more deeper social issues, such as houselessness. How are we creating spaces that are welcoming to all users? Flexibility and use. So what are some examples that you may have experienced that you would consider flexible, or spaces that are definitely not flexible? And how does a space that is flexible or not flexible change the atmosphere and culture of that place? So flexibility, this could be, think maybe of a plaza. What are all of the events and life and things that can happen in that space? Have there been places where you feel unwelcomed? And what are some of the elements in those spaces? Okay. So I also want to just talk about some other examples of ways that we can create more equitable spaces through this thing called tactical urbanism. I'm going to stop sharing my screen because these are the end of my slides. And I'm going to turn my camera on. So there's this thing called tactical urbanism, which is a really fun practice that kind of goes into the flexibility of design, where spaces can be more imagined by the community and the user. And tactical urbanism, we've done it in Birmingham a few times. If you've heard of Parking Day, this is an event every September, and it's a global event. And what it is that you take a parking spot and you turn it into a pop-up park or a pop-up cafe, a pop-up whatever your community wants. And this is typically community-led, but it's a very powerful way to reimagine space. And it is also the perfect opportunity to think deeper about space. How can we create something that is usable for all of the users? And when I say what is usable for all of the users, I mean, can someone who is hard of hearing, deaf, blind, etc., how will they move in that space? How will someone in a powered wheelchair move in that space? How will someone with kids move in that space? So it's thinking of the big picture, all of the users who will or who will not be using the space. And as someone who studies space, I'm always going into areas around Seattle or Birmingham or wherever I travel, and I'm watching who is using that space and why certain spaces are not activated. So I'm actually going to take a pause there. I would love to start a conversation with all of you and start thinking more about some spaces that you've been in and maybe have felt hostile, or if you have any questions, I would love to answer them. So yeah.
Let's see, there one place that banned urbanization. I think the broken Fire program. It is located in University of Montevallo. It seems like close to Alina. Okay, it's in like a sort of distance of each urbanization, how we get into a destination.
I'm sorry, you kind of broke up a little. Do you mind repeating your question?
What are the primary example for urbanization?
Yeah, so oh, I'm sorry, I did something on my computer. So urbanization is, if you go back through history, urbanization, cities are constantly growing, and many times places have been designed to keep people with disabilities out. And I think, you know, I identify as a person with a disability. I'm a wheelchair user, and I feel this a lot in our own city in Birmingham. A lot of the design is hostile, in my opinion. For example, there's lack of transportation that's accessible and reliable to use. Also, many of the sidewalks are not usable. And also something that's very important to urbanization is affordable and accessible housing. So I think these are probably the three most important topics of urbanization. And also with the growing climate crisis, we're going to see more cities be at risk for flooding, disaster, earthquake, etc. And there needs to be a better plan on how to not just rebuild our cities, but also to include people with disabilities in that conversation. There's a lot of other issues within that topic just from the start, which I won't get into, but it's quite interesting to get into if you're interested in it. If you just Google disability and climate disasters, it's a whole other conversation and presentation. But so there's a lot of complexities with urbanization, and cities are constantly growing. More and more people move to the city. There's, I think, kind of obvious reasons why people want to live in cities. There's better job opportunity. There's typically more resources. There's just more city life. There's more things to do. So, you know, as we continue to grow as a society, we really need to get better at including people with disabilities in that conversation on how to build and create spaces. So I hope that answers your question, but yes.
I see it right now.
Hi, Amelia. This is Veronica McGee. How are you?
Hi, I'm good.
You and I have met. You may not
Yes.
remember me.
Yes, I do remember you.
So I'm so glad you're on this call because I had forgotten that you are also a dual city person. And definitely, like you said, Google power chairs and ER visits, and you'll see how most of these ER visits are caused by our poor accessibility and mapping in our urban environments. But what are you currently, I'm also on the parent advisory board at Lakeshore Foundation also. So I'm just curious, just very specific question. Is Lakeshore getting involved in this conversation with real estate developers and urban planners regarding, you know, all these concepts, the visibility and, you know, all these basic things. And I know with John Kemp being the new CEO, that's a huge, huge step forward for us. So I just wondered if you could kind of share with the group what an exciting opportunity Birmingham has right now in changing our landscape when it comes to accessibility. And we've got some great things happening, and how they might be able to take it more to their, you know, to their, I mean, local communities where there is a lot of times you go down Main Street to shop at a little town and your power chair can't get in any store. So what do? Just write a letter to the mayor and to ask the mayor to, which is a story we heard earlier on one of our PIPA conferences. But anyway, I just kind of wanted to share a little bit about what do you think are some neat highlights coming up for Birmingham?
Yeah, I think Birmingham's at a really pivotal moment. We have the World Games coming up in just a few months, and this is going to provide a lot of opportunity of growth. And if Birmingham pulls it together and does it right, I think we'll have a really big jump in equity around the city. I think transportation is going to grow tremendously in the city. These are my hopes. Fingers crossed. There's a lot of great people working on these projects, so I have high hopes. But I think after the World Games, this is going to be a moment of importance to continue that momentum of change. For example, the sidewalks, just looking at UAB, just go for a walk someday and just try to pay attention to the accessibility features or lack of accessibility features. And these can include, I talk about sidewalks a lot just because, well, that does affect me every day. So, but there's also many other features of accessibility, audio signals at crosswalks, safe walkable streets, movable streets. Do you feel safe crossing a street? Are there benches? Is there shade? Things that just make you as a user feel safe going down the street. But I'm sorry, that was a bit of a tangent. But yeah, UAB is a prime example of the campus itself of accessibility problems. I do think, so yeah, I think there's a lot of fun projects going on. I mentioned the parking day project that was on 20th Street. And if you go there today, I believe there's a new bus lane there, but there's also more outdoor seating area. And, I think COVID also had a lot to do with this idea of outdoor seating in cities all over the world. A lot of people feel safer sitting outside because, you don't have to wear a mask. It's safer. But anyway, so I think some of these big moments have improved accessibility and just more fun, flexible urbanism. So I'm pretty hopeful for the future of Birmingham. I think, like I said, if we can continue the momentum that the World Games is bringing, then we'll be in great shape. But, progress doesn't happen overnight. It takes a while for things to change and to see progress happening. So, there's a lot of urban planners. Yeah, go ahead. Sorry.
What gets so discouraging to me is seeing new development where you have this clean slate and it's not old thinking anymore. I mean, it's just new development that is not meeting these basic accessibility, visibility guidelines because developers aren't educating themselves or taking on the accountability of doing it right and just don't even care or want to spend the money. So when you go into a brand new development, whether it be a restaurant or a residential, I mean, it's just really frustrating to see why our communities just don't get it in so many ways.
Yeah, that's definitely a big problem. And that's just something to be wary of when cities do grow. A lot of times outside organizations and firms will come in, maybe who don't communicate with the community, and then they'll put in what they think would be nice and would look good. And that's actually a big problem that can cause gentrification issues, which then just contributes to displacement. And so yeah, that is a big problem in all cities in the world. And that's not unique to Birmingham, unfortunately. But yeah, I think we see that. And yeah, go ahead.
I had a question real quick. What about accessible playgrounds?
Yeah.
Are there any in Birmingham? I know there's one up here in Huntsville where I am. It's called Kids Space.
Yeah. Yeah, so there, I believe there is an accessible playground in Hoover. I can look it up and send it to the group to Linda, and she can share it with you guys. But there is one in Birmingham, and I'm sorry, Hoover. But yeah, I think so. Inclusive playgrounds is kind of a new concept in the planning field and landscape architecture field. There's a really good one in Chicago, which I know doesn't help anyone in Birmingham right now, but I think that is a prime example for people to look at. There's a lot of fun elements, and it's also very sustainable in their design, which is super exciting. But yeah, accessible playgrounds are really, really cool.
I don't know, but I think of it, my name's Jenny, by the way. I think of it as a stepping stone because it's for the younger kids, but it's actually a stepping stone to what we could do, what we could apply the technology of universal design to things for adults also.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think going off of what you're saying is that when we have accessible, inclusive playgrounds, that also starts to change the narrative of disability. You know, that gets everyone, disability or no disability, to start, I don't know, communicating and coming together better. And I think that's really big in changing what society defines as disability. So I talk a lot in my studies about the built environment. And I really do believe that we can change the narrative of disability through the built environment. And it's elements like that, having more accessible play spaces, and then just going past that, of course. But that's definitely a big stepping stone.
Thank you.
Just good public restrooms would be a start, and having family restrooms and spaces where you can, just start. I think in North Carolina, they have actually just made it, it must be some type of mandated new law, because I go there a lot, and every restaurant I go into, or most places, has a family bathroom, even if it's an older building. So they must have done something to change that, which would obviously, I'm sure everyone on this call, especially with our parents with kids with autism, and our my son is a power chair user, and he doesn't like having to go into the women's bathroom with me to have him help me. So that just that's just such an obvious human right.
It really is. It's interesting. I think coming into this field, I am the only person with a physical visible disability. And I've noticed a lot of my professors and fellow classmates are starting to think of things that they would never think of, like accessible bathrooms. For the first time, they knew when I was coming, they had the building put in handbars to open the doors. So, I mean, it's little things that people will start to think about more and more as people with disabilities enter fields like this. And in policy is really big in changing the narrative as well. And I think that, landscape architecture, urban planning has to engage in that topic as well, because it will change things like zoning rules, and also like what you're talking about, the accessible bathrooms. And yeah, anyway, I thought it stops there, but yes.
Amelia. Hi, I'm Lisa. I wanted to ask, so if we see a problem or have a better idea, like we are starting the process of building a local park here, the county engineer has been extremely helpful in suggesting things. We're not to the point of like an inclusive playground, but like entrances, curbs, things like that. But who would you go to if you have an idea about something to make it work better? Would you go to an architect or landscape engineer, civil engineer? How does that flow?
I would definitely communicate with a city planner and a landscape architect. Engineers are great, don't get me wrong. However, they often are missing this more human piece to the puzzle. And that's when your urban planner, landscape architect can come in and say, no, this is not equitable. You need this. We need to go past just the bare minimum. And the ADA has a really good starting point. However, it is still the bare minimum of access points. So when I talk about universal design, I also talk about the ADA, which of course is important, but it's just not enough. And universal design just goes to the next step. And I think that's what a lot of urban planners and architects are heading towards, is that same kind of language.
Okay, thank you. We have a courthouse in Bessemer, which is an extension off of the one in Birmingham. Beautiful, beautiful older building. And I went up and I had my daughter in a power chair and I'm like, I don't even know how to get in the building. And
Yeah.
the deputies were wonderful. They came out, they took us right behind the ramp, which was surrounded by dumpsters.
Yeah. So you bring up an interesting point, because that's another simple point of access that people can do. And this is a super affordable, easy way for cities to make change. It can be putting in signs. So just visual clues on where to go. It can be an arrow pointing, accessible entrance that way. And then also moving the garbage cans, making our entrance just as nice as everyone else's who are going up the stairs. So that is a very simple, fast way for cities to just acknowledge people with disabilities are in space.
Thank you.
I have a funny story because I think sometimes humor makes everything better. So one time, Kyle and I were going to our favorite Mexican restaurant, and he loves music, and they always have wonderful, wonderful bands. And he wanted to be out down on the little area where everybody was dancing and hanging out, but you couldn't get to that area. So he was really getting frustrated, and he just really wanted to be down there. So it was so funny. So I just had him drive up, and he asked for the manager with his communication device. And he came out, and I said, listen, do you have a way to get down onto that dance floor? And the manager was so funny. He goes, gosh, I was just thinking about that with another person who asked that same thing. I said, well, why don't we just go ahead and go on Amazon right now and order a portable ramp? I was joking. And I thought, because I said, he goes, well, yeah, I'll be right back. So he goes and gets his laptop. He comes out on his iPad. We go online, we look at portable ramps. He orders the portable ramp. So now every time we go there, he gets that portable. He's, people can know where that ramp is, and we just fold it out and go onto the dance floor. So I mean, it's just, people want to help. They just, they just aren't they're not thinking about they're not thinking about a lot of our population.
Yeah, exactly. That's the big problem. And I think, more and more as people, bring it up, which is ridiculous that we have to fight for the bare minimum, I think society will become more inclusive. But yeah, that's also a form of tactical urbanism. It's just simple, fast solutions. A lot of community designers and community advocates, they do this. They'll put in not portable, but kind of just small ramps in areas where the curb cuts aren't cut correctly or cut at all. And there's a ton of ways that people should be doing that. It's very easy. There's a really good TED Talk I encourage all of you to watch. I can share it. It's this TED Talk by this urban planner. No, I'm sorry. He's an architect, and he has a vision impairment, and he talks about moving through spaces as an architect, with a low vision. And it's a really powerful conversation, and definitely got me thinking about design work differently, because I have my own lens on from just my own disability and my own experience. And I think that's a missing piece in a lot of conversations and designers, is thinking about other people's experiences. And I think there also just needs to be more diversity in the field in general. It's it's still a very, it needs a lot of work. But does anyone else-
Amelia,
yeah.
I was wondering, do they yet offer classes on the disability history and universal design at your university?
So no, they don't actually. A lot of this is my own kind of capstone. However, there are classes and majors in disability studies, but it's separate. And I think that's a big part of the problem. There is no intersectionality in these conversations. And a lot of universities now talk about DEI, the diversity, inclusion, and equity. And they try, or at least they make it sound like they try to include more diverse populations in all of these design practices, but that's not always the case. Disability still falls extremely short. So I think in the future, there needs to be more intersectionality in the field. But yeah, right now it's separate, and there's not a whole lot of universities that have a disability studies department. I think Berkeley probably definitely does, because that's where the disability rights movement really started and took off. I think the University of Chicago also has one, but there's very few. A lot of it's independent study.
Wow, okay, I did not realize that.
Yeah.
Well, good luck
Amelia.
on your journey.
Thank you. It's quite the journey. Thank you.
Hey, Amelia. I'm Joanne Moulon, and I think I may have met you somewhere before. My daughter Ashley might have met you, Ashley Moulon. I'm not sure, but your name sounds very familiar. But anyways, I wanted to say that I think one thing that Birmingham has been, has done well is they've built more of like splash pads for the summer for people with disabilities, except for one thing, if they don't have a manual wheelchair, you can't drive a power wheelchair through a splash pad. So I think if they were able to get like the chairs like you would use at the beach, or some type of manual wheelchair that, like the beach wheelchairs or any of those that they could have accessible for people with disabilities at the splash pads. I know, I've never been with Ashley because she's older now, but I wish they would have had it when she was little. But they have one in Vestavia. They have one now at Liberty Park area. There's one in Chelsea, and they're also building a new trail system. Well, there's already a trail system called the Greenway Project.
Yeah.
And it's in Chelsea area off of 41. And they're expanding that trail system, and they're going to have two parks, one on Highway 41, one on Highway 43. And I know the one on 41, I believe they're going to have a playground that's accessible there as well.
Yeah, those are really great. I'm actually working with the Land Trust Alliance on accessible trails, the extension going around the city. So the accessible splash pads are also really great, and goes back to the inclusive play, which isn't something that I study a whole lot on, but it's very exciting to see happen.
Mm-hmm.
This has been a great conversation. Does anyone else have any comments or questions?
I do. Let me do a last comment. I ever rode on a Max bus where people get transportation.
I have not, just because the stops are never accessible, and it seems like it's never reliable on time. And I recognize there's a serious equity issue in public transportation in Birmingham, and that's gone on. That's a really deep history and problem in Birmingham, and the lack of accessible transportation that's public and for everyone. I think that's a major problem that needs to be addressed immediately. And I mentioned earlier that I hope that the World Games will bring on more accessible transportation, but looking at transportation as a whole, are the buses accessible? Are the stops accessible? Do they go to all communities? Who's left out of that number? I think the city has a long way to go in terms of equity for everyone. So have you ridden a Max bus? They're not great. They should be great. I love public transportation. Honestly, that's why I moved to Seattle. That's one of the reasons, is because we have a train, we have buses. It's a whole other world. But you know, when we don't give people public transportation that's easy to navigate, then we're not allowing people equal employment opportunities, equal education opportunities, and just general social life opportunities. So it's a horrible problem. I wish I had answers on how to fix it, but yeah. More
The
funding
TED Talks,
for transportation.
Amelia, the TED Talk we had on before you was a mom that said she just, you know, when she became mayor, she was like, well, you know, we need to get in those places to make the decisions.
Yeah.
So
Yeah, you know, there's a lot of privilege in having your own reliable car, whether it's accessible or not, and having the resources to be able to go from your home to a job or school or wherever. It'd be nice to be able to just be mayor and fix all the problems in a city, but yeah. In my after my undergraduate studies, I was an AmeriCorps member for a short time, and I was working in the Woodlawn neighborhood. And Woodlawn is a really good community. They're very close, and there's a lot of powerful things happening there, I think. However, I was obviously working in this lens of disability justice. And I remember going on a walk in the neighborhood, and there was a street pole that was in the middle of the sidewalk. Fine, whatever, I go around it. And then there's a trash can in the middle, and you know, Birmingham, we have amazing trees. And so the roots started to break the concrete on the sidewalk, and so I couldn't move. So I see this other man who is a wheelchair user, and he's just driving in the middle of the road, a very busy road, which is extremely dangerous, but it was his only choice. He didn't have another choice. What other than to stay home? That shouldn't be the answer. So looking at urban planning and equity, these are some of the prime examples of cities and equity problems. And I feel like the issue of the sidewalk should be something that should be easy for cities to keep up. Simple maintenance. I mean, so I don't know what the answer is to that. I think community organizations and advocates should be, you know, advocating for that issue, going to the mayors, to the city leaders, the urban planners, and demanding to fix these simple things. But then I recognize there's also a lot of issues in fixing areas. So anyway, I'm going to stop there. I could ramble on about that issue for.
Okay. I'm super down myself.
I'm ready. I'm just sitting here listening, honey. No, I need.
my favorite, Amelia, is at Children's and Hospital in that old turnaround. It's they're all handicap parking places, and it's where you can drop people off in the old building. And then they put cones out because they don't want certain people parking there. And it's like, well, if I want to come in and get my, you know, you can't get out of the car and remove the cone and then park there with your handicap van. So it's like,
Yeah.
you just, the thought process of some of these people is just amazing.
Yeah, it doesn't make any sense sometimes.
Sometimes you just have to run over the cone.
True.
Yeah. Well, I'm real excited about everything that you've talked about, and you're going out to Seattle for school. That's just exciting, just to pack up and go across the country like that.
Very exciting.
When will you be, are you coming back to Birmingham?
I don't know. At least not for 3 years. I'm still working with Lakeshore and NICPAD virtually, but for right now, I'm going to stay up here. There's a lot of work to be done.
Yeah, that's amazing that Lakeshore worked that out with you.
It's extremely nice.
Mhm.
But yeah, thank you for having me. And this has been such
Hey,
a good
Amelia,
conversation. Yeah.
one last thing. I'm really excited about the new building that NICPAD is moving into. Kyle and I got a tour of it, the collaboration with
Mhm.
UAB, and they're going to have their own space. But you know what was so cool? This is Dr. Renner, right?
Yeah.
Is that his name? Yeah. He met Kyle and a couple of us, and he really wanted us to be involved in the design of the space and how we could make it more friendlier so I'd love to talk to you a little bit about that, and because they kind of have a blank slate, and that space is, got some great potential.
Yeah.
So yeah,
Yeah,
I'll get back with you on that.
totally. It is a great space. It was hard to move because it was such a nice new space, and then I was off to Seattle before I could really enjoy it. But yeah, they did a really good job at designing it. And I think now that most people are in person, they're using that space again.
Well, no, this is the older building. They took over an older
yeah.
building down by and the research group is moving in there and everything. And it's an older building, so he wants to help make it more universal.
That's right. I forgot about that one. That's exciting.
Well, thank you again, Amelia.
Yes, thank you. So I'm gonna hop off unless anyone has any other questions, but I think you guys probably have my email, and I will send that TED Talk that I mentioned to all of you. And yeah, thank you so much. Have a great Saturday.
Thank
Bye.
you.
Bye.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, well, she's a great advocate and learning about, I think she'll impact when she's still very young, but she's on a good road to have a lot of impact in her future. So that concludes our program for today. And I know I sent an email to a few of you that hadn't completed the survey. If you can't do the QR code, I'll resend the link too. Are there any other questions?